Karaoke night. No mai haere mai, kia ora mai tātou, ko Lisa Warbricker Ho. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come in and hang with us in this Māori Tech Talk session. Without further ado, I'm just kind of like straight to the guts kind of girl, so won't muck around. You all got the whole Andy's tech, housekeeping korero. All I remember is don't be a dick. In terms of housekeeping. Please don't be a dick. And use the mic. So our korero today for the next 58 minutes or something is around the unique place of Māori in a global environment. What does that mean? So if you haven't read your brief that I worked painstakingly to put together, in brief, what we kind of land on is unique in this global space for Māori is our taonga Māori. It's our Māori treasures. What does that mean? Indigenous flora and fauna, Māori icons, our Reo, and indigenous flora and fauna, Māori icons, our Reo, and there was one more. It'll come. Yeah, art forms, our kapa haka, our waiata, our karakia. So those that know. The question then is how we protect our taonga Māori. That's what we're here about today. There might be some other cool korero that comes up, kei te pai. So I'm here with a couple of pōtai. I work in the space of Māori business and economic development for Manawatu Wanganui. And I'm also engaged in research around the commercialisation and benefit sharing of taonga species within the genomic research space. There's that guy, there's always that guy. And that's a really cool korero. So that's my contribution, I guess, to this conversation. However, and this is the drum roll, I'd like to introduce you to my newfound best friend, Ms. Linnell Tafri Hudia from AJ Park's IP specialist. So for those that aren't in the know, Linnell here was our first Māori IP specialist 20 odd years ago. So she writes the book on what this stuff is about. And on the cusp of a very cool conference that was held down in Nelson, Ngā Taonga Tuku Iho, was about the cultural and intellectual property rights and protection. This isn't a Māori conversation, this is the Aotearoa New Zealand conversation, and that's the lens in which today's korero is about. So I'm going to let Linnell introduce herself. Just briefly, my bones are in Wanganui River, and my dad's up in Ngāti Rangiti i Ngāti Awa. No mai haere mai, kia ora. I'll hand over to my mate. Oh, you go.
Tēnā koutou katoa. E te whare e tūnei, tēnā koe te marae takato ki wahora, tēnā koe. Ki ngā tangata whenua o tēnei rohe, kei te mihi ahau ki a rātou. E noho ana tātou i raro i o rātou koroa i te rānei. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ki ngā mate, kua whetū rangitia, moi mai rā. Rātou ko e he atu ki te pō tātou e tuana ki te ao tēnā tātou. kia koe, e te tuakana, nā mihi ki a koe mō tō tono kia hau, ki te haere mai ki konei. Nō reira, kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. Ko waio he uri a hau no Taranaki, i te taha tōku māma ko ko Taranaki te maunga, ko Aotearoa te waka, ko Ngāti Runui te iwi, ko Taiporo he nui te marae, ko Hāmua, ko Hāpota ki ngā hapu, i te taha tōku pāpā ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko la nau tawhiri huria tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora. Kia ora everyone, thank you for having me here. It's my second NetHui, so I'm delighted to be back again to talk about this kaupapa, and really keen to hear your thoughts and ideas about how we can protect taonga, because as Lisa said, it is an Aotearoa problem. It is a problem that we all need to get involved with. It's an issue that our Māori culture is being ripped off around the globe by others, and if we don't do something about it, then we're going to lose it. And if we lose it, then what is that's not a good thing for Aotearoa as a whole. That's what makes us special. That's what makes us unique. There's no other Māori culture around the world, and if we don't protect it, we are going to lose it. And so what does it mean to protect our Māori culture? And that's a huge question, and Lisa touched on some of the issues around that. How do you protect taonga species and indigenous flora and fauna? That will be different to how we protect our icons and our words and our images, and that will be different to how we protect our reo. But one of the things that come out of the conference, the Ngā Taonga Tuku Iho conference, was, that it goes, Māori need to be involved in the conversation. Māori can't be excluded from this conversation because they have the whakapapa, they understand the kawa and tikanga, or the protocols that go along with that culture, and so they need to be at the forefront of that conversation. And what else came out of that conference was really Māori need to step up and start claiming, what they want protected. We need to all stand up. As Tracy Tawhio said, I don't know if you heard her say that, but she said we just need to blow this up, so we just need to blow it up and change it and create the new regime that's going to move us forward. Because it is special to all of us in New Zealand, and it's not just Māori that need to protect, it's New Zealanders as a whole. So I'm just going to finish there, and then hopefully that will spark some questions or korero in the room. And so, tēnā tātou katoa.
Just going to break the ice.
Kia ora tātou whānau. My name is Kaiarehi Hega. I'm from Rautnapa, and my job is the researcher and archivist for the movement. Now you're talking about the kaupapa 262. That original claimant is actually an old kaumatua from Taitokarau, Aparahamahimi. And when we're talking about indigenous rights or Māori rights, it's really, really hard because there's so many different whakaro on this kaupapa. And especially with my background, I'm lucky I was brought up on the marae by those old people. And I had the opportunity to sit with some of the people that were on the original world tour of 1924 and 1925 when Tahu Pōtiki Wiremu did that tour. Fabulous. And so all the information that we have in our coffers, our archives, is unbelievable. And let me tell you, there's only one thing that those people of old wanted. They wanted the treaty to be reenacted and the law to be recognised by the government and by those previous governments when we were let's put it this way, from the 1800s until we became a dominion, and the country that we are today. And the one thing that when I hear this notation Kiwi and then the notation New Zealander, you know, there's a partnership in all this stuff. And if you don't have the right information, you cannot make an intelligent decision. So I'm saying today that even though we have the Declaration of Independence 1835, the Treaty of Waitangi 1840, the first Māori people to ever go to England was Ngāpui. They went there in 1882, followed by Tāwhio 1884, and then Kingirata 1914, and of course Tahupu Te Kiwurumurata in 1924. And what he took to the League of Nations, he took his dossary. And that what's written on that dossary is incredible. This is what I'm saying. If we're talking about tongue of this country, you need to do your homework. And it's important that it comes from a Māori perspective. I love my Pākehā brothers and sisters because I married one of them. So yeah, this is what I'm saying. I'm just opening up the ball to, you know, make us look at all the stuff. Because if you're talking about taonga, you know, you have to break it down. Because when we're talking about taonga, we're talking about te whenua. When Tuputanga Kaua came to Ratana Pai in 1920, he said to Ratana, I do not come for the healing of the tangata, I come for the healing of the land. So when you talk about taonga, we're talking about everything that is based in this country. And if I have to rattle off some of the prophecies of Piriwiritua, but I'll leave that later on. And this is what I'm saying. I only want to open it up, you know, to us to have a look at this. It's a big aspect, you know. I came from the airport. I went to Australia this year, and this Chinese guy stopped me at the gate, and he said, "Oh, you filled it in wrong. You're supposed to put a New Zealander." And I said, "No, actually, I'm a Māori." New Zealand Māori. See, this is another prospect to it. On my passport should be New Zealand Māori. So there's all these things you're talking about, taonga. There's all these elements. There's lots of elements. And if you don't put them up, you have to be a rangi Māoria to put these aspects up. It's no good going in there with a taiha or a mere. That don't work. If you're peaceful with, you know, with certain things, and this is what I'm saying, that most people don't understand the real story behind that clause, you know, that kaupapa 262, really, really important. And like he said to the Labour government in 1936, Labour, I give you this taonga, the Treaty of Waitangi, but let me tell you, you will never fulfill it. Give it back. Kia ora mai tātou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora mai tātou.
I might just respond to that. I mean, kia ora ngā mihi nui ki a koe mo tō korero. I agree that there are lots of layers to taonga, and there are, you know, there are lots of ways in which our taonga are being protected at the moment, currently under our legislation. And if we look at the Kamate Haka Attribution Act, Te Awa Tupua, and the protection that's been granted to that are under the Whanganui River Settlement, the Tūhoi Settlement, the Waikato River Settlement. You know, little bits of aspects of tikanga are being crawling back into our law, but it's too slow. The process is too slow. You know, a lot of those have come out of settlements, which have, you know, those negotiations have been going on for years. Our people have suffered as a consequence through that process. And so it's a really difficult process, and we're still seeing all these other issues, the misuse, you know, like on the news, or what was on the news, like project last night, Whakamana Cannabis Museum. Sorry my language about that, but that's ridiculous. That is the most ridiculous use of our language in association with an illegal drug. You know, like that word has such important meaning. You know, it means empower. You know, all those sorts of great connotations, and it's been associated with a cannabis museum, which to me is highly offensive. So I'm looking for someone to take up that cause if they want to take that up. But you know, like we're just constantly seeing this misuse, and so action is becoming critically urgent for us to get back to a position where we are able to protect our taonga.
It's on. Just ko wakitoria toko ingoa no Wanganui ahu. And that was my question: is what can we do now to make those actions? How can we get onto it and get something done? Basically, what should we do to do that? Do we form groups? Do we form networks? Do we form education? Is it about educating everybody about what the taonga are and why it is there? So my studies were around Y262 about 10 years ago. 10, 12 years ago, and mine was around the appropriation of Māori icons and how they were used then, and I was looking at all of the different the claims and that through our ronga and waiata, etc. So and then it's sort of like there's nothing, since then there's been nothing. It's been very quiet. So So now this has happened, and we need to create action. So what is the action that we can do to get this rolling again? For people to understand that, and I think it might be around education, and we can do that with online networks, etc. Do we create a network that's around?
Kia ora for that. I think all of the above, all the ideas you suggest are great suggestions. I think, I think from the conference, we as part of the conference organising committee, we're still figuring out what our mandate is from that conference. So we're having those discussions at the moment. Like we are working on presenting to the ministers, Minister Nanaia Mahuta and Minister Chris Fafoi, a communique coming out of that conference, a statement about, what we want to see recognised in our laws, and then starting to form networks as a consequence of that conference to create, protocols, to create protocols for the different taonga that we've already spoken about. I think education is huge. I think that's a big part of it. So, reo in our schools, I think that's a good start. That's a start. People start to our rangatahi appreciate our language, learn our tikanga and kawa that goes with that language, and so begin to appreciate that. That then flows on into adulthood, etc., and you start to embrace our taonga and recognise the importance of protecting our taonga. So education, I think, is a huge part. I think forming groups, educating each other is important as well. And it's not hard. It's not hard stuff. It's not hard to acknowledge tikanga. A lot of tikanga is very similar to our common law that we exist under. It's about respect. It's about honouring the other person. It's about enhancing. I hate to use that term, but I can't think of a better one. But enhancing the other party. It's not about taking from them. It's about enhancing them. It's all those sort of concepts which are not foreign concepts, and it's just about being a good human being sometimes.
Kia ora koutou, ko Leith Hara whahau. It's amazing to be part of this conversation. When I received the mic from Victoria over there, it was actually hot in my hand. So I guess people really care about this stuff. So just to bring it to, you mentioned those layers, the different aspects. Can we talk about the internet layer? Because this is kind of what this conference is about. And it's really important that we look at, how do we protect the taonga, Māori taonga, when we're talking about the internet? Because the internet can often be a place that's not characterized by respect. It's more characterized by, it's out there, I can grab it. All I need is access to it. So a sense of entitlement. I see a cool image on Google image search, great, that's my logo sorted.
So what are the mechanisms for dealing with that? Obviously education is important, but what else do we need? So for example, do we need to have a system that's really easy to implement for protecting indigenous rights digitally? There's a question.
Why, yes, we do. It's a lovely segue to my korero. It's my little thing at the moment. Can I just see, out of interest, who here has an influence in your place of work with regards to your policy or your statements of intent? Can I just see anyone? Yeah, it's probably more for you guys. For me, it is about, and in my experience, especially in economic development and working with government, it starts with a change of policies. I mean, there are strata. There are strata starting from the home and in our communities. I'm particularly interested in making that direct action impact with our policymakers, embedding within those statements that filter out and govern and rule and direct and guide our communities, ensuring that we have some form of statement that acknowledges at the very least our taonga Māori. What that looks like, give Lynelle a ring, she'll give you a really cool legal statement or something, I'm sure. But it does start with our policy. It does start with a simple statement. We don't have to change the world in one bite, but we can certainly influence. To Internet New Zealand, who are fabulous, there is a responsibility to those that own and that can change and influence. And part of that is the vigilance about what happens, perhaps. For example, domain names. Anybody can go on there and legally claim the domain name Lisa Warbrick Hot Stuff or something like that. And I have to go through a legal process to stop that, and it will cost me thousands of dollars, as it did our whanaunga, an artist who saw his artwork spread across these mobile vans for hire. He went as high as the High Court. Thousands of dollars for him personally to address that. It starts with policy and to some extent law, but when it's not right, why do those that are impacted have to, fight to protect and save that? So there's a school of thought, and certainly a challenge I put out to those of you who are influential in your policy, in your place of work, even if it's as much as including it in your business meetings. Just put that random thought out there. How have we protected our taonga species or our taonga Māori today? It can be that simple. I'm sure somebody else has a good idea.
Kia ora, I'm Rob Elshire. Thanks for pointing at me out earlier. Just to follow up on this, so I have a small genomic research business with my wife, Robin, here in Palmerston North. And when we were setting up our contracting, it's very important to nail a bunch of things down, but it was really important to us to have a section in there to say, if you are working with taonga species, you are representing to us that you've had the appropriate conversations. Something along those lines. I'm not getting the words right. I haven't looked at it in quite a while, but it was important to us to do that. And in doing this, it was kind of difficult, right? What kind of wording do you use? And what does this all mean? And so I worked with my friend Phil Wilcox, who's a Māori genomics researcher, and we came up important. And it's important to us as a company that we have the conversation. So that's where we start. I guess that's what I wanted to just follow up on what you had to say with that. Cheers.
Kia ora, Dale Phillips. I happened to look up a phrase which a friend of mine sadly passed, Lally Haddon, rangatira and kaumatua of Ngāti Wai and Ngāti Whātua.
Cool. I'm not addressing this question at all, but hi, kia ora, ko Brenda Ho. I work for Te Kawanatanga o Aotearoa. We work on a methodology called co-design. We go out to talk to people when we deliver government services. And for some of course, we talk to Māori, because you gotta honour the treaty, yeah. And when we end up producing anything that has any Māori artefacts in it, taonga, designs, art, anything, we're like, how do we release this? It's not ours to release, it's not ours to put on our website with our crown copyright on it. What do we do? So we ended up landing on some work by a group up north called Te Hiku. Te Hiku produce open data, open source, open lots of things. And instead of using an open source existing license, they wrote their own, and it's called the Kaitiaki license. And it's you can come see this, you can come read it, you can't take it. If you want to take it, here's who you talk to, and we'll have a conversation. And it's all written in a nice license. Some lawyers have been over it, and so if you can Google Kaitiaki license, it's useful in some contexts.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of blowing this stuff up. You know, like it's turning the intellectual property regime on its head and re-evaluating whether the values that underpin the intellectual property system align with tikanga, kawa, etc. around the protection of taonga. And, you know, and the Y262 decision looked at that and, you know, the claimants, not the report, the claim could see, you know, they acknowledged that there's no alignment there, and so therefore there needed to be a different regime, something different. And so a Kaitiaki license is an example of doing that, and there are many other protocols out there. Another example is the UN that commissioned some tukutuku panels to be displayed in their foyer. You know, usually when they commission, automatically they own the copyright in those works. Under that regime, the copyright is still owned by the artists, and that was a deliberate attempt to recognise tikanga in that process and as part of that commissioning licence. So it's about rethinking those ideas that underpin the intellectual property system, and it does require a significant rethink because they don't align. You know, the intellectual property system is about commercialisation, it's about making money off something, or making money. It's a way to make money off your investment in innovation and development, research and development. Protection of taonga is not necessarily about that, although it may lead to that at some future point, but it's not about that. It's about, and there's other values that underpin that, including kaitiakitanga, kotahitanga, tino rangatiratanga, etc. There's, you know, different value bases, so it does require a complete rethink.
Kia ora whaia, kia ora koutou. I try not to get up too much. However, look, law is L-A-W, but there's the other type of law which is L-O-R-E. The conception of understanding this process about intellectual property, that's why the old people didn't think like how we thought, because their thinking was totally different. The conception of their thinking that we talk about, kaupapa, tikanga and kawa, how they thought in those days was piti, was poropititanga, kawanata and pitiana. See, these are the aspects that it's a lost history, and some of us have a privilege to still carry it. And this is what I'm talking about. If you're talking about two types of law, it's really hard. How can we as Māori unite together when we're all getting our own claims, yet we are of one identity? The prophet Ratana didn't want us to go and collect our royalties or whatever, what the government owed us. He wanted us to go in as one iwi, as one people. So if you're talking about the internet, it doesn't matter where you start. The elements are all floating in this void. You still have to go back to the root of the trunk, if you understand what I'm talking about. And this is why I'm saying that the aspect of this all, you have to unite together And you have to design your own laws that fit you as the tangata whenua of this land, and still having and keeping and embracing our Pākehā brothers and sisters and all those who wish to come and stay in this beautiful country, the country of opportunity that is still today. There's a kupu that he said, it was the 5th of January 1926, he was standing on the marae, because as you all know, we've got our 100th anniversary of the maramatanga on the 8th of November. That's when the cloud, you see that word, the kapua, the vision came to Ratana in the cloud. And it was the 5th of January 1926 where he stood on the marae. And I'm translating into Pākehā for those to understand. And he said, this is I, te māngai. This is my kaupapa. I shall give it to the clouds, and the clouds shall disperse it to the world. It's a matter of understanding these interpretations, not from a flesh point of view, but from a concept that it's a lost art. They talk about this ancient law. Do unto others what you do unto yourself. Very important. And so this is why I'm saying with all the lawyers, I've sat with some of the best people in the world at the table, and we've come to conclusion that at the end of the day, if we're not united in one voice to see the views that we all strive for as people living in this wonderful country, Aotearoa, te waipunuma me whare Kāori, as we know it as New Zealanders, we have to come to some agreements that you cannot get rid of that equation which equals that Māori are here, and you have to deal with us. But it's no good dealing with us individually. You have to come together under one voice. That is the only way to do it. And you have to come in not as a radical, putting up your banners, bringing a tire. You have to come in with compassion, with love, because love breaks all barriers. And we're still talking about the internet. We're still talking about our taongas. And this is what I'm saying. You got to go to the root of the tree. It's no good going to the branches and they're bearing no fruit. So nō reira, like I said, I'll just get up and pop in every now and then if our sisters allow us to. But this is what I'm saying. Our taonga is beautiful. And you must share all this taonga stuff because it's for the whole world. Although we are from different tribes, different backgrounds, we are still the same offspring of the same creation. It's beautiful to be a human being. So tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora mai tātou.
I'll just pop in like you are there, cousin. So what I'm hearing, we acknowledge the taonga and the value that we have in terms of taonga Māori. Again, it begs the question, so what does that mean in terms of the internet and how it impacts our taonga Māori? So I've heard a couple of things as to, it's about educating, it's about getting together as groups, possibly policy change makers. One of the things that we haven't sort of touched on that's of interest also is around the data sovereignty. What happens to the data that flies in the cloud that's available to the world? It is a big question, but it's the more we put it out there and are conscious of these things that are happening in the background, that information that belongs to me and my grandmother and my great-grandmother, my kuia, is being used in China or America somewhere. That is hara to me. That's at it's probably spiritual and culturally sense. But for us as Kiwis, our economy strives on the tourism backbone of this unique nature. Our communities identify with our taonga Māori. When we have hui, it was a ring around to make sure that we had rangitane here representing. But with respect to the internet, how do we? That's a really hard question. Do we license it? Do we stop people? Do we police it? And that's the conversations, and I get we're not going to think that today. Maybe that's that focus group stuff where we come together and we do tonatu ministers, and we have the likes of our Nell here, ever vigilant within the legal korero. But it is about what we can do within our organisations, contracts, policies. Hey.
So, thank you. So I just want to come back to the statement that the purpose of IP is to make money. It was not that way in the beginning, right? And it is certainly seems to be that way now. And I think when we talk, the comments that you've just made around sharing things, and so just to be in the 18th century in the United States, when they set up the country in the Constitution, there's one clause in there that shows intent. That's the one that set up the ideas around IP, and the purpose was to promote the arts and the science and the creative arts. That's the purpose of IP starting in the US. There's a whole big history around this and how it's worked, right? But the point was to create a commons of knowledge for the betterment of people all the way around. And I think this isn't a big stretch from what we're talking about in Tonga either, when we go back to some of the origins of these ideas. So I think when we lose the root of the point of this thing, then we start talking about making money, and then it becomes, well, the thing that it is now and which we're concerned about in this conversation.
So I think if you go back further than the US law, there is actually IP, sort of rights were started back even further than that, and it was all about branding and, branding of cows and branding of trinkets, sort of artworks, and it was about making money. It was about stopping people from copying and passing off their products as your products. So it was about stopping misuse. So there is there has always been an element of has always been based on the root of about commercialisation of something, I agree. There is the IP system does have this idea of it's a social contract about encouraging innovation, about encouraging improvement and encouraging development of ideas for the betterment of people. So for patents, for example, you get a 20-year monopoly to enable you to recoup the benefits, the money that you invested in that development, and then you share it with the world, and then the world benefits from the whole product. And so there is an element of the social contract within the IP system, but it is traditionally based on making some, commercialisation and protecting that investment and making money out of it. And it certainly is the case now, and that's the system that we work under now. I did want to go back to the point about, sorry, I've forgotten where we got to before that. It was data and sovereignty. That's a huge issue. That's a significant issue for Māori. Again, it's about acknowledging the individualistic nature of what we have. The special nature of Māori culture, the special nature of the data that we have, the special nature of everything that all that there was recently all the DNA from all our living kakako have gone to an overseas organisation. Like, how did that happen? How did that happen without I'm not sure if there was some consultation with Māori or not. There may have been, and I could be completely wrong there, but how is that information stored all offshore that's not controlled by New Zealand for a start? If Māori weren't involved, then why weren't Māori involved? Because kōkako are such a endemic and taonga species of this country. Those sorts of things are happening all the time, and there's just this element of there's no consideration like you did in your contract when you set up your contracts of, have you got the right, have you had the right conversations before you come to talk to us? It's just about having those thoughts and conversations first before you jump down into developing something that could potentially be a breach of or use of our taonga without the correct consultation taking place first.
Kia ora. Ko Bernie Savage taku ingoa. Look, I wanted to put a couple of things out there. Firstly, the perspective that I have in terms of what is ownership and what is guardianship, herere care. For me, ownership means that I own it, I can make whatever decisions I like about it, commercialise it, do whatever I please, or chuck it away. And that's what ownership for me means. Guardianship, though, and I can do that without consulting. I can actually do that without consulting. But guardianship, which is our kaitiaki, and that's a tanga, and that's our perspective that Māori have, is that we must consult. It's just part and parcel of the tikanga. So we don't particularly own anything by right on our own. We do need to make sure that, as kaitiaki, we are there as the guardians to make sure that, that whatever that taonga might be is utilised appropriately, is shared appropriately. Hey, I'm all into our culture being out there amongst the internet, but there are dangers and there are pitfalls that can happen because we cannot and have not been able to control what goes out on the internet, and we can't control who might take whatever pickings, to use for commercial purposes or any other purposes as well. So that's a really, really tough, tough question. Possibly what I might say, and I'm cognizant of this because when sometimes when I'm thinking, what's that song that that Māori song that goes, and I remember the name. I can go on to Google, I'll Google the name, and I'll come up with a number of hits. Then I'll go in and I'll look at each one and I'll go, oh my God, some of the words are wrong. And I don't know all the words, but I know that the words are on there. I go, oh no, that's not right. There's real dangers in that, is what I'm saying. So there's. I suppose it might be even a message to Māori mā, kia tūpato, be careful about what we might put out on there. And I know there are absolutely wonderful things out there, that can that we can showcase, if you like, to the world. But we need to also to be careful about what we're showcasing, because put it out there on the open internet and it can be taken and utilised whether we like it or not. And we can get into those issues about, they've used my thing, they shouldn't have, we've got to go to court and it costs thousands of dollars to do that. It's just one of those things that before we start doing that, we just, Māori mā, I'm talking about, or all of us, just be careful about what we actually put out there. And what we put out there, there's the way that it gets there. We have, take for instance, Te Matachini or regional kapa competitions. They are live streamed. They're live streamed. And it's wonderful because people who really want to see those particular art forms, they will go to the right places to live stream that stuff. But then, there might be others that might come on there, see something, a little tidbit that they like of it, and they might want to use it for commercial purposes, don't know. And so those are the things that, we... as a people, as a niwi, as Māori, as New Zealanders, that we need to think about, before we put things out there on the internet, because at the moment, it is easily accessed. If I can Google something and get it, then anybody can Google something and get it. I don't know the answer to that. I was just saying that our perspective on ownership and kaitiaki-tanga is really, really different. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I just want to quickly add to your comments. The use on the internet is, you're right, I think everything you've said is correct. You have to be very careful. We do a lot of work with people around sort of writing their policy. You know how you tick the terms and conditions for access to websites. Having innovative terms in there around when things can be used and can't be used, so people agree. And they agree to it, even though they might not read it, but they agree to not use what you're putting up there in a way that you don't approve of. And it's about, it's using a clause like was in, sorry, I've forgotten your name, sir, at the back there, that, putting a new clause in your contract that recognises taonga. There's ways that you can do that. Like one of these action points, that can be, it's just about thinking about it, whether it's appropriate to put it in your contract, and then so including it in there because it should be there. And it enables you to be careful and tread carefully in the way that Matua just spoke.
I'm conscious of time taking long. Does anyone have a burning? You've got a last minute, just jump in there, haven't you?
I'm just
going to
reply to the gentleman.
Go on then.
Kia ora tātou. I try not to talk too much because I know after a while people goes, oh, that guy thinks he knows everything. But the problem is that sometimes you do. However, let me explain. Okay, so if we're having a look how to protect our taongas, it's pretty hard for me because, there's a lot of stuff that people borrow from our collection. And I'm talking about 1 million photos. There's a woman that I've met. She's a whanaunga of ours. She's a software developer. She's designed this imprint that when you're using your stuff on internet, you put it into your whatever you got online, and then the moment that people tap onto it, it goes into their database. But it's another kaupapa. So what I'm trying to say here is that I heard you bring up this term about constitutions. If you have a look at constitutions, there are only 3 countries in the world that don't have a constitution. Israel, Great Britain, and New Zealand. Those are the only 3 countries. Why? You know, when we're talking about taonga stuff, it's trying to get around our initiative, our thinking of describing what taonga are. Like I said before, it comes in many elements, but especially to do with the internet when people are using our stuff. Don't worry, I've come across thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have used our material online. And thank God I'm a good person and I have background skills and I can rip into their computer and, whatever. But what I'm saying is sometimes respect, today when I have a look at people that only want to make money and make money for personal gain, it's terrible. But us as Māori, because we've got that compassion, that aroha stuff in all other nationalities, but the main thing, if you want to protect your taongas, you have to first unite together underneath one mind. You cannot do it individually as an iwi. You have to go in there as an amalgamated front, one thought. Law. That's why it's not in every school. So there's all these elements, and I don't want to debate about it. I don't want to put my professor's hat on and have an argument. But the thing is this, there are ways around it. And the ways around it are simple. You got to work together. It's the only way. And so when that time comes to make that intelligent decision, we make it in one voice. Kia ora koutou.
Hello again. I would just like to make a comment on that last one. The closest thing I think New Zealand has actually got to a written constitution is actually the Maori version of the Treaty of Waitangi. No, I know it's not regularised. I understand the legal perspective, but a simple reality is the Maori version does form quite a good level of constitution, if it's applied to all the population, by the way. Coming back to the point that was made about IPCP earlier, about you have to be circumspect about it, what it is you release or what you don't release. I work in that domain. We know we have to be circumspect about what we say or what we don't say in a particular situation about the work we do. That's just a fundamental reality of it. And the reason for that is actually very simple. Other people would really love to just misappropriate and misuse. So I absolutely understand the domain.
Kia ora tātou, ko Ian Te Reo toku ingoa. I'm a digital technology teacher at Taonga Tutoa. It's a high school in Aotearoa, and we put a really big emphasis on our taiohi, our students creating digital media, digital content, websites, being the creators for the new digital world. And I guess my question was, at what point, where is the line? Like, what's the appropriate way to approach that? And at what point does it become misappropriation? And I like what you said about, guardianship. Māori must consult. That's a good guide. But yeah, I just kind of, in real terms, if we, I've got students, they do go on Google Images, they download the images, they trace them, and they use them for inspiration and they improve on them. But how do you navigate that? And yeah, where do you draw the line? Who's the authority? what if we are teaching some of our Māori students, but in that classroom are also Pākehā students? It's a hard one. And my other question to Pa was, if you have a genuine interest in learning that knowledge, learning the history so that you can rightfully appreciate the taonga, how do you go about that?
That's a big question. And at the conference we talked about, when does it become cultural appropriation? And that is a really hard line to draw, and it does depend on the whānau, hapu or iwi who are involved, what the level is that they want to stop any use. They may prefer no use by anybody else but their own, and then others may be quite happy for others to use. So that's a really difficult question, and I can't answer that for all Māori at this point in time. And it goes back to some of the points that Mātua here was saying about having a sort of a level somehow as a one, standing together as one and having a joint view on what that level is, what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And that getting there is going to be very difficult. There are actual laws around not using Google Images and taking them off there, so that breaches copyright straight away, potentially. If the image has copyright in it. So I wouldn't be encouraging the students to do that from now on. But there's definitely I guess you can be inspired, but it has to be something created independently. That's kind of the line I tell people that ask me. It has to be created independently. It can't be